Shout out to Thankful Canon on Reddit for the topic of today's video. The Fallout universe has been a home to countless inhabitants over its history, both players and NPCs alike. They've built countless doors to countless homes, and as a result, created a near infinite number of stories for players to discover. In this video, we will be taking a closer look at one of the stories that took place inside one of the hundreds of homes scattered across Boston in Fallout 4. A story that, despite its proximity to a well-known Commonwealth trading hub, many players might never have discovered. If you've enjoyed previous Wasteland stories, be sure to discover that subscribe button and hit the bell to be notified of each and every upload. Just a stone's throw away from the walls of Bunker Hill, we can find a small alleyway that leads to an opening in the maze-like design of the tightly packed buildings. Venturing down this alley leads us to a seemingly innocent-looking blue house, with a few dead ghouls littering the front steps. Of course, this is the apocalypse, so we already know that looks are only skin deep, and that even the most innocent-looking presentations can hide a dark reality. Entering the house, we can see that our suspicions are quickly confirmed, as this quaint little dwelling is still the home to a small handful of ghouls. Nothing that we can't handle, though, and far from the true story of this home. On the kitchen counter, we find the holotape of a research assistant named Peters, who was the willing test subject of an experimental drug designed to help clear radiation from those who were exposed to high doses. As a part of the experiment, Peters was actively exposing herself to 2 sieverts of radiation every 24 hours, and during the first tape, details that she will be able to administer the treatment once her exposure level has reached 6 sieverts every 24 hours. Based on the symptoms described on the tape, our protagonist doesn't seem to be in the best shape, commenting on the various afflictions and discomfort she's experiencing as part of the trial. Even so, Peters is confident that the trial will be worth her temporary discomfort and that the finished product will go on to revolutionize the industry. Making our way up to the second floor of the apartment and quickly dispatching with another ghoul, we find what seems to be the bedroom of a small boy, as indicated by the space-themed toys and posters. It is also noteworthy that this seems to be the epicenter of the brain fungus infestation we find infecting the house. Whether this is related to the radiation testing that Peters was performing is unclear, however. We also find a larger bedroom, presumably the master bedroom that belonged to the 2 skeletons we saw lounging on the porch on our way in. This is also where we find Peter's second holotape, sitting on a dresser with a book and a small clock near the top of the stairs. This second tape, oddly enough detailed as tape number 6, was recorded on the 1st of April, just 3 days after the first one we found was recorded. This tape goes into much more detail about Peter's trial, as well as the ever-increasing symptoms she is experiencing. At this point, Peters has increased her daily radiation exposure to 6 sieverts, the necessary threshold before the experimental serum can be administered. However, the test shows no immediate effect, and as we will soon learn from the final tape, the experiment may have actually been doomed from the get-go. Climbing the final set of stairs, we come face to face with the attic door, a small room with a couch, boxes, and one sneaky glowing one that, based on contents from the final tape, may very well be poor R.A. Peters. Without mentioning a timestamp for the recording, Peters details that a previously administered second dosage of the serum proved to be ineffective at curing her radiation sickness even hours after injection. According to Peters, it would seem that the serum is ineffective once someone has reached a critical level of radiation exposure, as she has. She also goes on to detail that when she had contacted her superiors to terminate the experiment, she was denied, ordered to remain quarantined for the duration of the trial. Realizing her death was inevitable, she asked a Dr. Roberts, presumably her direct supervisor, to pass on a message to her parents. After failing to record a satisfactory goodbye on her first attempt, she made a note to come up with something less sentimental before ending the recording. Thus ending the tragic tale of research assistant Peters, a smart young woman eager to help change the world, but in the end was just another test subject for an entity much larger than herself. Normally, this would be where the video ends. Like previous Wasteland stories, we discovered an interesting location and learned a little bit more about the hidden history that took place there. However, unlike previous stories, this one leaves me with more questions than answers. First and foremost has to do with the presence of the other ghouls in the apartment. While it is possible that more ghouls wandered towards the presence of a glowing one over the 200 years following the Great War, it is a little strange that they're there at all. Since the door to the attic was locked, were the ghouls drawn to this location simply by the natural radiation that the glowing one gave off, even without making close personal contact? Is the allure of a ghoul that irradiated enough to encourage other ghouls to settle near them without ever being physically close to one? Perhaps the brain fungus and the glowing mushrooms are a byproduct of both increased radiation levels in the house, as well as the more damp conditions of the apartment, allowing them to grow more naturally and giving ghouls a safe place to hide reliably without starving to death. The second thing I want to examine is the layout of the building itself. At first glance, it seems like a pretty basic layout. Nothing stands out as being too out of the ordinary. On second glance, though, one starts to wonder. Primarily, who actually lived in this apartment? Was it just Peters? We can pretty confidently assume that the ghoul in the attic is her, and the fact that we find her holotapes placed around the apartment sure does indicate that she was able to freely move from level to level. If that's the case, though, why are there 2 mattresses in the master bedroom? Why is there a child's bedroom, and why would she lock herself in the attic, as opposed to just locking the front door of the already barricaded apartment? What would make more sense is for this house to have belonged to her parents. This would explain the 2 skeletons on the couch outside, the dual beds, as well as the child's bedroom. Sure, maybe the bedroom belonged to Peters, but when you look around inside, it feels more like the room of a young boy excited about aliens in space, not the room of a young woman interested in science and medicine. If this is the case, though, does that mean Peters locked herself in the attic, refused to talk to her parents, exposed herself to a lethal dosage of radiation, and experienced the vast array of symptoms she details in her tapes, all within that one room? How is she getting information out to her colleagues? How is she contacting them? Why were 2 of the research tapes outside of the attic? No matter how you look at it, nothing about this house makes sense. Perhaps most perplexing of all, though, is the timeline. According to the first tapes we find in the apartment, Peters began documenting near the end of February, with the final dated recording being on March 1st. We also know that during the 3 days between recordings, she was increasing her daily exposure from 2 sieverts to 6, a 200% increase in the severity of dangerous radiation she was subjecting herself to. After just 3 days of 2 sieverts exposure, she was already experiencing major physical effects, and even if we give her the extreme benefit of the doubt, there is no way her final recording takes place beyond the end of March. This begs the question then, why did this case remain standing for over 200 years? Most of the events or stories we've documented either take place shortly after the Great War, just before it, or years later. This event happened almost 9 months before the end of the world. This implies that Peters' tapes, as well as her ghoulified body, remained untouched for close to a year before the nuclear bomb that devastated the Commonwealth ever touched down. Maybe whomever Peters' bosses were worked to keep things under wrap until they could figure out what to do with Peters and her research. But this wouldn't explain the casual presence of what seems to be a couple sitting on the front porch of the heavily irradiated house. Nor would this explain the fact that several of her research tapes are still inside the apartment. It might explain the presence of the other ghouls there, being other research assistants come to collect material, but the lack of additional information leaves a lot to be speculated on. Unfortunately, this is just the harsh reality of some stories out there in the Wasteland. The complexity of human history, some stories just don't have enough details to draw a complete picture. Over the course of hundreds of years, information gets lost, memories fade, and all that is left is the disconnected parts casting shadows on the wall. But hey, that just makes them all the more exciting to discover. There's stories like this one scattered all across the Wasteland, hidden just off the main road. Let me know if you found anything interesting out there, and it might just make it into a future video. Until next time, I thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all out there in the wasteland.